we're doing all we can together with our colleagues, friends and supporters and all the other family support groups across the country, and everybody working with families affected by substance misuse to raise awareness of their needs and their experiences. Our key message is that families affected by substance misuse just don't get the recognition that they deserve. They're often stigmatized. There's a lot of prejudice against them. I know this is the same with people with a dependency, but it's the families who are often there to aid recovery, to help somebody into treatment, to pick up the pieces, often at their own emotional, social, and mental expense. So I'm delighted to be here and welcome you all, and thank you for your support. We are unashamedly trying to raise some money this week as well. And all our fundraising goes into our services for families, particularly our AdFam at Home remote support sessions. Thank you so much, everybody, for being here and for joining the Awareness Week. We'll hope we'll do another one next year. We are being recorded, but just to reassure you, there is, you will only see, we can't see you, I can't see you, I can only see, unfortunately, only see myself. So don't worry, you're not on screen. And unless, and if you don't wish to have your voice recorded, if you ask a question, don't worry, we can edit that out. But I'm going to encourage everybody, when the time comes for Q&A, if you put your questions in the chat and we can go from there. So the purpose of this week is very much to raise awareness, to bring this issue out from behind the shadows and out into the open. So many people with lived experience say to me, but you know, we live our lives hidden in plain sight. And we believe that it's only by speaking out about these issues and campaigning on behalf of our people with lived experience, can we ever change the perspective and the paradigm around that. So I'm delighted that we have Philip here. I'll introduce Philip in a minute, and Joe Huey, who's on our lived experience advisory group. AdFam was set up going on for 40 years ago now, by the mother of a heroin user. And we have stuck very firmly to those principles ever since. We listen to our advisory group, we listen to people with lived experience, and we shape our services and our campaigning and all our messages on what they have to say. So I'd like to thank all of you who are also, you know, those of you working in support services who have signed up to our report and to our campaign. And without further ado, I am going to hand over to my colleague, Philip Breslin, who's a consultant with AdFam. And he is going to talk about our alternative drug strategy, if you like, substance misuse through the lens of the family. And I'm going to hand over now to you, Philip, to take us through the key points and key messages in our report. Thank you. Over to you, Philip.
Thanks, Viv. Thanks very much. Alternative drug strategy sounds very grand, doesn't it? It's a sort of discussion piece, really. And I know I was asking Rob Stebbings from AdFam earlier, who was attending. I think we've got a very broad range of people: civil servants, providers, commissioners, family members. I mean, with that range of people, I'm going to upset at least half the audience, I would have thought. But please get in on the chat. And, you know, it's one of the advantages of being on a Zoom call. It would be nice to be face to face. Given the train strike there today, I suspect half of you wouldn't have been able to turn up anyway. But one of the advantages is that you've got the chat facility, you've got the questions and answers. Please use that. Feel free to disagree vehemently or agree vehemently. hopefully what it's not is a bland discussion, because I think there are a lot of points to bring up here. The document AdFam has put on its website, so I'd urge you to go there. I think they've sent a link to everybody, and you can have a look at the argument that's put forward there. I'm just going to take up a couple of the points really, and perhaps they are the more controversial points that are in there. And I wanted to start by just looking at the situation as it stands, and then perhaps come on and think about the future. So we've had, I think it would be fair to say, a very busy year in the drug and alcohol sector. We've had a drug strategy come out, which was also the response to the Black Review. And the drug strategy came with money attached, which is the first time for a long time that there's been new money. We've been used to falling revenues in the sector, and the drug strategy was widely welcomed. That's probably unsurprising when there's money coming in, and also government strategies do tend to get welcomed these days by the charitable sector broadly across a whole range of issues. People don't want to bite the hand that feeds them, and so we tend to see a response that says, we welcome this new 3-year, 5-year, 10-year strategy and the ambition behind it, and we would like to see A, B, or C. And I think that's what we got from the sector. There was a broadly positive response. The drug strategy, as I say, was also the response to the Carol Black Review, which had come out in 2 parts. And again, the sector had been involved in that review and was broadly supportive of the review, particularly the first part of the review, which stated where Carol Black and her team saw things going wrong, which was to do with funding and perhaps the skills base being eroded and other issues. I think looking back now, we've got sort of 6 months on the strategy and a bit longer on part 2 of the review. I think looking at it from a family angle, it's all a bit disappointing, actually. The Black Review had 32 recommendations, something like 1,500 words. When I went through it recently, I found 7 related in the recommendations to the family. Family interventions should be more widely available. That's had 1,500 words worth of recommendations. And when you look at the drug strategy, it says the old way of doing things isn't working, and yet the drug strategy looks like reducing demand and supply. It seems to be very similar things to drug strategies that we've had before. But those are the documents that we're having to work with. That's the world that we're in. And I suppose the situation as it stands, and as you will know if you're practitioners and if you're commissioners, is that there is a focus. The problem has been defined largely as one of drug use, the impact on crime, on drug-related deaths, the impact that then has on the community at one level, this broad thing of community, and then at the other level on the individual. And I was trying to find, there's a document or a diagram that's out that I saw only a couple of months ago, and now I can't find it. The internet's just too big, isn't it? This is the problem. And I can't now find it again. Somebody in the audience may have spotted it. If I describe the diagram to you, because I did want to put it up at this point, and it had the individual substance user at the bottom of the diagram. And then it had wave after wave of interventions and support and different organisations. And then right up in the top left-hand corner, in tiny little letters, was the family. and a little dotted line that came down from the family to the substance misuser with sort of, you know, can help or something in brackets. If you recognise the diagram, do forward it to me or forward it to Advan, because it was in use. Colleagues had recognised it as a document that was doing the rounds. And I thought that really spoke volumes, actually, about sometimes about our attitude that the family's out there somewhere, and the can help bit does sort of speak to that view of the family as potentially recovery capital, which I'm sure all you've heard of as a term. It came up, you know, a decade or more ago. I'm not sure it's still useful for us particularly. Maybe it's served its useful life as a term, but the family as recovery capital, as one of the things that can help a person to recover from their addiction. And of course, families do undoubtedly do that. But I question whether the access to support should really be on the basis of how useful somebody in need can be to someone else. And that I fear that recovery capital sets that as a parameter for the family. Oh, they're a useful adjunct to the person that we're really concerned about here, which is the substance use. So that feels like that's where we're at. And if we look at where a lot of the money's going and a lot of attention and effort is going, it is going towards drug-related deaths. It is going towards heroin and crack use, and within that, quite a narrow band within the group of people who use heroin and crack, often people with experience of sleeping rough. And we don't want to get into a debate, do we, where we're saying, oh, well, you know, we want to get resources off someone else, they're getting too much, we want some of that. We don't get into those debates in the sector, and rightly so. But I suppose because families haven't been the focus, if you carry on doing more of the same, they're never going to be the focus. And I'm not saying that people who are sleeping rough and using crack and heroin should miss out. But what I am saying is there are whole swathes of people who are currently missing out and have missed out for years, for decades in this debate. And so I suppose looking ahead and thinking about through the lens of a family, where could a substance misuse strategy broadly, where could that go, and what could that look like? We could turn things on its head and say that for most of us have experience of a family. Most people in drug or alcohol treatment have started to use within the confines or within the home, within a family. That is where most drug and alcohol use starts. That's where most drug and alcohol use impacts. Yes, I know there are other groups of people, and there are people where that's not their context, but the vast majority is there, and it just seems like it's not just a missing piece of the jigsaw. It feels like most of the jigsaw actually is missing, because we jumped from the individual through to the community, and we miss this piece that's absolutely crucial and absolutely central in the middle. And what we also do with our drug strategy, I think, is we look at the level of drug use, and we give a sort of hierarchy based on the amount and type of drug that someone's using. So we say, well, that's heroin and crack use. I mean, that's got to be the most serious. Those are serious drugs. And look at the amount that people are using. So the top of our pyramid is people who are addicted to what we think of as a really serious substance. And then we make our way down through the pyramid. And that pyramid actually is drawn up on the basis of the type of drug that people are using. But I think we could also say, where are the bulk of the harms taking place, and what are those harms? Yes, clearly drug-related death is the most serious impact that we could think about in terms of drug use, but it's not the most common impact. And it's not the most common long-lasting impact that goes down the generations and affects society really, really deeply. The most common impacts, I think, are those ones which often don't come into drug treatment because they are lower levels of drug and alcohol use with higher levels of impact, and they're taking place within the family. And that may be lower levels of parental drug or alcohol use. It may be lower levels of drug use amongst children, which are causing real concern and worry for parents. It may be those levels of drug use that are impacting on school achievement and attainment. These are wide societal problems, and they are largely dealt with outside the sector at the moment. They are largely dealt with through what was the Troubled Families Programme, supporting families, through early help, through social work. Those are people who have the family as an organising principle, and they see these problems coming up all the time, but they are not necessarily well versed and skilled with substance misuse. And what we then have is a substance misuse sector, which is seeing the individual as the organising principle. We put a service around that individual person. And then we don't look as comprehensively at the family. The family is an add-on or an adjunct. So I think what I'm arguing for in the paper that ADFAM have put out is that we reframe the way that we look at this problem, and we think of the organising unit as being the family. We look at the common experience for most people, which is within a family, that we think of problems not related to the level or type of drug use, but the impact. And we think of how we help people based on their needs, not on whether they themselves are using drugs, but the fact that they have been impacted by drugs or by alcohol. And I suppose this becomes more than an academic debate when we consider that there are commissioning standards, advice coming out soon. And beyond that, we think that there will be an alcohol strategy. And I think with alcohol, even more than with drug use, this is something that takes place within the home, within a family context. And that is where damage is done all the time, but at a level that doesn't get it into treatment. So I think when we are considering the alcohol strategy and when we're thinking about what's going on with that, I think that we should be lobbying for the centrality of the family unit, and not simply to say, well, we should just follow a pyramid that puts addiction at the top and no alcohol use at the bottom. I hope people have got questions, comments, want to violently refute what I'm saying, because as I say, it's a discussion piece, and I'd be very interested to get your views. Thank you.
Philip, thank you very much. And yes, to reiterate, if people could put their excuse me, questions or comments in the Q&A function on the webinar, and we'll take those after we've heard from Joe. So I'm going to excuse me, hand over now to Jo Huey, and she's going to talk about her lived experience of having a parent with an alcohol dependency. And although, just wanted to say, I mean, you did talk about alcohol, Philip, and I think it's just fair to emphasize that our report, our alternative strategy, is about drugs, illegal substances and alcohol. Over to you, Jo, and thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me. I'm a big fan of ADFAM. They do such great work, so it's a real honour to be able to speak today and to share my story, and hopefully I can relate some of it as well to the report. For me, my dad was the drinker in my life. I can't remember a time when he wasn't drinking. I have also had to experience my older sister's alcohol misuse and also my younger sister's drug use. So you could say I've got quite a bit of experience in addiction. And I also work with daughters of alcoholics who I support just because of everything that I've been through. And I know that they need the support, and we all know that there's not a lot of support out there as as the report suggests. So my dad's drinking and who he was as a person, as I've gotten older, I've come to realise that actually not all of his behaviour was down to his alcohol misuse. Actually, some of it was just him. That was just his character, his nature, which I believe was maybe made worse by his drinking. And we all know that the drink can affect people in different ways. My dad was somebody who was extremely strict, was in the army, had very high expectations and standards, and I had to live up to those expectations and standards. I didn't know any different, and that was kind of the environment that I lived in. My house was me, my mum, my older sister, and my dad. And most of my life growing up, we had foreign students staying with us, so which may seem insignificant to this, but it hopefully will give an idea about the environment I was living in, which is hugely important when you're growing up with somebody's drinking. And that the reason that we did that was for money, and also it impacted on me as a person, because it stopped me from having my own room a lot of the time, because the students needed the room to sleep in, so I'd have to either share with my sister or my parents, which in and of itself brought some trauma to me, having to share with my parents. My dad's drinking wasn't something that he made very obvious, as I now know after doing lots of work on myself. He kept it quite secret. He used to go and sit in his car in the driveway. He would sit in his bedroom, and we basically very absent from my life and my sister's life. So I didn't see the dad that was constantly drinking with beers or anything. He used to like vodka, but he would drink anything. But I knew that something wasn't right from his behaviour. I didn't need to see the cans or the bottles. I knew because of how he behaved. And there's this age-old thing about parents protecting their children, and oh yeah, they don't know what's going on. And we knew what was going on from a very young age. So I think again that awareness needs to change. Kids are not stupid, and they know what's going on. And I definitely knew something wasn't right. And in that environment, you can tell because you feel on edge, you know, the whole common walking on eggshells, not knowing what you're going to be faced with, was pretty much most of my, you know, childhood. I felt very alone, very distant. That sense of my dad was never really available to me. He wasn't really very present. And when he did try to come into the home to sit with us at dinner or watch TV, we all felt really on edge because it wasn't our normal. We had quite a lot of difficulties throughout my childhood with my dad's drinking in his behaviours in terms of admission to hospital. He never sought his own help. We as a family never really got any support, and he often had to go. He got sectioned, but you know, nothing was his own choice. He never chose to stop drinking. And even now, as I train social workers and things like that, you know, I often have to explain to them that the person doesn't necessarily want what you want, and they are not going to meet your timelines. I appreciate when it comes to children, it's about safeguarding and all the necessary things that have to happen there. But it's just something to bear in mind that people with an addiction do not, you know, go to sing to your hymn sheet. And I know that can be difficult when it comes to things like statistics and government, you know, wanting to know whether something's working or not. But for me, you know, I've worked with people that have got addictions as well. It is not easy, and you have to be patient, and they have to be ready and willing to do the work. Sadly, my dad never was. I saw him have quite bad hallucinations, and all of these things as a child make it, well, you kind of have to adjust to your environment. So one time I remember him saying to me, Joanne, do you see it? Do you see it? I said, what, Daddy, what? Do you see the baby? I said, what baby? The baby in your PE kit. Do you see it? Do you see it? And I'm standing there, I'm looking at him, and I'm thinking, what is he talking about? I'm scared, but this is my parents, so that's confusing. Why would he do that? And why is he acting like this? But every time I said, no, there's nothing, I started to realise actually he's getting more and more angry. So as an outsider now, reflecting on that situation, I'm already recognising I'd better adjust my behaviour here if I don't want something to kick off. So you can see how as children we're become very switched on to what's going on for our own survival. And so, oh yeah, I see it, I see the baby dad, I see it. And then you start having this deluded sense of reality and not believing in yourself, not believing what you see or don't see. And that's just one small example. And those are the types of things that we have to do on a daily basis. Trauma and things like that are not just big things. They are small things that we perceive and, you know, internalize and experience. And all of these little things are huge. And sometimes those things can get missed. And I know, you know, how I interpreted my home life was very different to my older sister. We've each got our own temperaments, we've each got our own perception of what went on. And for me, that environment was very unsafe. I felt like I had no power, I couldn't change anything. I tried to run away a few times. I was stuck, powerless, absolutely powerless. And I felt so frustrated because I couldn't get out of this situation. And my mum was absolutely petrified of my dad. So she wasn't really much use to me. So I felt very alone. And at that point, I had nobody apart from my older sister to speak to. We didn't even talk about it in our own home. So, and I know for some of you, none of this will be new to you because this is the typical life that we lead. And some of the things that I've noticed now I'm out of it is the difficulty I had expressing myself and, you know, how even now, and, you know, I've been through an extortionate amount of therapy, you know, it is very hard to know how to express myself because I don't even know how I feel because I've never paid attention to it. So it's like I need to start paying attention to my body and where I feel things in order for me to then try to communicate that. And so the impact, which, you know, I agree 100% with what was said earlier regarding impact, because it is 100% about impact. And this impact is long lasting. I have a group of about 1,300 ladies who are in exactly the same position as me, who have been affected by a parent's drinking, and they have got so many challenges as adults. But where's the support for them? It's very important to provide support for children that are going through it now. But what about people like me who are adults that never got the support as children that need the support now? Because we're all going, you know, there's a number of us that will be seeking either private help or help, you know, from the NHS. All of this is, you know, showing how the impact of living with a parent's drinking can really affect you. My dad actually ended up kicking me out of the house when I was 16 because he thought that I needed to be taught a lesson, I think. And I don't know his reasons, I can surmise. And at that age, obviously, I was very young. I was at college. I didn't know what to do. I didn't have hardly any money. I was working part-time as a waitress. But it was a double-edged sword, really. One, I was absolutely petrified. But two, I was relieved. I'd lived in this cage, this prison, for most of my life. And finally, I was free. And even though I was nowhere near ready for that, I got some relief from the prison that I found myself in, because each and every day when, you know, obviously we didn't get social workers, but if social workers or other professionals are involved, teachers and so on, they're not there at night. That's the worst time. They're not there when things kick off. You're, you know, as a child, you are completely powerless. And if you haven't got another adult that's going to fight your corner and protect you, then, and you might have two parents that are drinking. Thankfully, I didn't. But I just think that the support for me just wasn't there. And I think it brings me on to a really important point about, if there had been support, I would have liked to have seen much more knowledge. I would have liked to have had much more knowledge, much more openness, and to reduce this stigma around talking about it. And I feel that, and I know that I heard this on one of the AdFam things before about, you know, if the professionals are feeling awkward about talking about it, it's not going to make it easy for us to start talking about it. You know, the professionals need to help to reduce the stigma when they're working with, you know, people, family members too. And I think that if they make it okay, we'll feel like it's okay. It's like we need that permission to be able to express the things that we've been through. And a lot of people that have lived with their parents drinking will feel such guilt and shame, and they won't, and a huge amount of loyalty, and they will feel like a bad person if they speak really badly of their parent. And I think it's because they don't have that understanding that just because they speak about their experience doesn't mean that their parent is a bad person. And I've been trying to help people to see that, you know, if their parent is the person they are, they're struggling with an addiction, it doesn't mean that they can't share their story. So it's just trying to encourage them to do that. And I think if I'd have had some professionals that, or some time out and space to be able to, you know, that would have in a sense sort of been forced on my parents to allow me to have that space to go to get some, you know, relief somewhere, whether that was an extra space at school or wherever, it might have brought an opportunity for me to feel safer and to be able to open up. So definitely a lot of the things in this report I can relate to, and I love this part in here, which is on page 7, which says, you know, is this person being harmed by drug use? And so that's sort of directly or indirectly, which relates to family, anybody really. And I think that changing the question, which is what it talks about, is really important. Rephrasing these questions, you know, who's actually being harmed? But it does sadden me that looking at the other report, the harm to hope strategy, it still makes me feel that there's a total lack of understanding on the scale of the impact on families, which just frustrates the hell out of me, I'm not gonna lie. Because if they understood it, that strategy wouldn't look like that. How can we still be in this place? It makes no sense to me. We've got so many professionals and charities like AdFam that understand this. It's very frustrating that we're still getting this sort of thing. And I think one of the key things that really gets on my wick, which Viv will be well aware of, is government and money. It's like sometimes I feel like they give us a bit of money to shut us up and then it's just not consistent. But we all know that when someone gives up an addiction, they need to replace it with something else, positive, hopefully, more healthily. And I think maybe the government need a replacement for their addiction to the money that they get from alcohol sales. You know, what that is, I don't know. But I think I don't know how it's going to change. I just hope that we can keep doing the work we're doing, and at some stage it will make a difference. But for families, and I know from the people in my group, we are still struggling years later. And this does need to change. And I hope that this will change with strategies like this and the work that AdFam do. So I think I'll leave it there. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jo. And that was brilliant. Thank you so much. And there's been so many supportive comments in the chat platform. I think the great irony about the situation is that you are very brave to speak out. The irony is that if you didn't, and if only more people would, then we could raise awareness of the issue. But the problem is that it is shrouded in silence for very good reasons. So well done for speaking out. And AdFam hasn't got a new uniform, which is pink. I must say it's just coincidental that we both got pink tops on. Thank you. Thank you so much, Jo, and thank you so much, Philip. Do we have any questions? If you'd like to put your questions in the Q&A function, if that's the term. Everybody in the chat is saying how powerful that was, and thank you so much for sharing your story. If we have any questions, could you put them in the Q&A, please? Oh, and just while I think about it, and Rob or Megan, I'm sure will put this in the chat. We've also launched today a report on, well, this is aimed at journalists actually, to try and to challenge the language that is often used in the press and social media, the language that defines people with a substance misuse problem and their families. So in partnership with Scottish Families Against Drugs, we've launched a report today called Reporting of Substance Use. So I hope people might have take, oh, there it is. Reporting of substance is a toolkit for journalists, but I hope it'll be useful for practitioners and support groups as well. We have some questions. Let's have a look. Jenny Lewis, hello Jenny. She's wondering, I think this is, I guess, to you, Joe, wondering if you deliver sessions in schools to children.
Not for want of trying. I have tried very much. Very hard to get into schools, but yeah, it's something that I deliver training to mental health first aid instructors and training social workers, but getting into schools has proved quite challenging. So no, I've not been successful on that front.
Yeah, well, I'll have to talk to you about that because we've developed some webinars that we're hoping that schools teams of will take on, largely around raising the issue that you've raised, Joe. You know, how can practitioners in schools, how can they support children with a parental substance misuse problem? I think this will be for you, Philip. This question from Richard McVeigh. How can we best influence local commissioners to be more family focused in implementing the drug strategy?
Hello, Richard. I used to be a commissioner, and what worked with me really was being told what to do. And, you know, as much as, I mean, organisations like ADFAM do a great job putting information out there, getting us to think family. But I do think that there's a role here for central government and for regional government to be looking at how we define the problem. I think there are some things going in the right direction, working together, working across directorates, I think is important because it gives commissioners in local areas a different view perhaps of the problem. At the moment, that's largely been around substance misuse working with homelessness in order to look at the issue of street homeless, which goes back to what we consider a problem, and we are focusing on a street homeless population largely. But I think if we work more effectively with colleagues in children's services, then that immediately gets us to think a little bit more about the family as the organising principle. So yeah, no simple answers around that one. There's kind of 150 commissioners across England, and that's why I think there need to be some strings pulled centrally around this.
Thank you, Philip. Yes, we totally agree. We have another question here, and I think perhaps, well, between us, we'll try and answer it. What are some of the current most effective solutions that can help families in substance misuse, that can help families? I don't know where, I mean, I think, you know, just to say from our perspective, there are a whole range of interventions. Some of them are actually, they can be quite expensive to be implemented. And I'm sure that there may be, I'm sure there are practitioners out there in the great, in the webinar mist or whatever, who might want to put some answers in the chat. There are interventions, and there is a lot of training for practitioners around supporting families. Some of them are, there's evidence-based interventions, and also peer support. A lot of people really appreciate. I don't know. Maybe Joe, did you want to add anything to that? And Philip?
Well, I was just going to say a couple of things, and I can say this because I don't work for AdFam. I do some work alongside them. A skills audit, look at what training your staff has got. I think those points that Joe was raising are really important. You need staff who are informed, who are not going to add to the stigma when somebody walks into the room and reveals something. So see what your staff know and don't know, and yes, AdFam do skills audits. There's also been a recent report by the Early Intervention Foundation just looking at things that work, and it's interesting. They do a couple of things, common features of things that are less likely to work for children, and that's treatment that's solely targeted at parental substance misuse. So in other words, just treatment for the parent, which is largely what we've got. We've got treatment for a person that we define as having a problem, or interventions that target parenting approaches in the absence of substance misuse. So in other words, the things that don't work are where we're working separately, and what you need to be looking at is things where the parenting programs are aware of substance misuse and are able to work with that, and the parental substance misuse programs are looking at the whole family and are bringing interventions that help everybody within the family, not just the individual substance misuse.
Joe, anything to add?
Yeah, I've put something in the chat about, it is really important for specifically children to have an adult in their life, that whether that's a parent or a friend's parent, a teacher, an adult that's quite influential, somebody that they really trust. It can have such an important impact on the child to know that they have got somebody that they can turn to, that they could maybe open up to. Then some of them may not even have that, especially if they've got two parents with drink or drug or gambling addiction. That's really important. And I think some of the basic stuff about, having fun, having an opportunity to have fun, because in the environment that we often live in, there isn't much of that. And I think there was actually, I won't answer another question that was on there. Yeah.
Thanks, Joe. Thank you. I'm just looking through the questions. This is probably for you again, Joe. How do we get the professionals guide? I'm not sure which one that is.
Basically, I wrote a guide for professionals to whatnot, which has got a whole host of activities, different ages that you can do with children, but it also explains about addiction, which I think Philip might have mentioned. We actually live with addiction, but we don't understand about it, which seems really, really weird, but it's true. And so it explains about what's going on for the person with the addiction, and it talks about lots of different things like that. And it's just really, I thought, useful information for professionals that may not know that much about it. So I'm happy for anybody to get in touch with me, and I can send you the details of the guide, which is, comes in a printed form. You can have it in PDF as well if you like.
Thank you. And just to, I guess, plug our website, which has got a lot of information on it for practitioners and families too. I'm just looking through. This is really for you, Joe, again. What's the best way to help a young person have the courage to confront their parents?
Well, I think that most of them, well, it depends on the relationship that they have with their parent, because if they're petrified of them, they're not likely to have that conversation, because they need to keep themselves safe predominantly. And if they know that like talking to them about what they're doing is going to cause a problem, they might do it once, but then they won't do it again, because it's likely that the parent won't react in a very positive way. I think that trying to, again, if they have got somebody else, like another adult or someone, they can try and talk to them about it in the first stages, because I think if you've got someone that you can try and, they're not very good sometimes at being able to express themselves, only in that, I don't like it when mummy or daddy is falling over, or I've got to clean up their sick, or whatever. They can talk about that. And again, they're more likely to do that with somebody that they trust. So they're not going to, probably because of the message that we hear at home, don't talk to anybody, they probably won't. But if they've got somebody that they trust, like a teacher or another parent, friend's parent, they're more likely to do it with them. So that's a starting point. It is a difficult one because they're very loyal to their parents.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, and this is where, people like yourself who've been brave enough to speak out, just to be so admired. But it's recognizing that it's an extremely difficult thing to do.
There's also the element that people don't always recognize the fact. I think somebody earlier said about the fact they don't know that they're a young carer. And I think that sometimes they don't, even as adults, we don't realise, I know it sounds insane, but we don't realise that we're the daughter or son of an alcoholic. But what I have found in the work I've done is it's much better to talk about, have you ever felt like this? Have you ever experienced that? Have you ever, do you ever feel overwhelmed, worried about things 3 miles down the road? Do you ever, and that stuff they can relate to. Are you trying to fix somebody that and trying to get them to stop drinking? They'll understand that terminology, but some of them won't even relate to the word anxiety, but they know what worry is and feeling overwhelmed is. So it's in the terminology as well.
Thanks, Jo. And it looks like so many people would like a copy of your toolkit. So you're going to be busy, and I'm good. And I just encourage people to have a look at the AdFam website. I'm not sure if we can put it on there for you. That might help. We could have a talk about that. And look at our resources that are not dissimilar. I think we've just got time for a couple more. I think this one is for you, Philip. How do you think, and this is the eternal question, how do you think mental health services and support should link with substance misuse support? You probably need a whole lifetime to answer that question, probably.
Yeah, I mean, I first started working in this area 20 years ago, and I think or more, and it was the first question, the first issue that came up was, dual diagnosis, services not working together. And it still goes on. And I know the Black Review was looking to address it, and I know government's looking to address it. And I think there's something quite fundamental about it, because lots of clever people have spent a lot of time thinking about this question over decades, and we're still not there. And there may be some examples of good practice that come up and then fade away. It's very hard. It seems to me that it's still in some areas it's not embedded, it's in the personalities of the staff who are working there, and you get a really good worker at a mental health trust who does the link work and gets in there, and you get a really good substance misuse worker who's cutting across and helping with individuals. In terms of the family, sadly, it's one of these, it's just another of these problems, isn't it? It's a bit of a maze to get into services and to get help. And family members often just don't define these things as different. Why would you? Substance addiction is in the DSM, it's a mental health issue, and yet we're trained differently, we work differently, we have separate services, we're funded differently. It's a perennial problem. I'm afraid I haven't got an answer to it, and I've not met anybody in my decades in this who has actually, except if you have one funding stream and one training thing, and it goes right the way through from training doctors training in different disciplines, as well.
Indeed. And I think just to finish on, Maddie from Sanctuary Family Support in Liverpool says, would it be helpful if we started to showcase organisations like ourselves? We deal with substance misusers and their families. And the answer is yes, yes, please do. I think, you know, the more we shout out about this, the more we talk about it, the more we can have a national conversation about it, the better it will be, because ultimately I hope that will mean that families get the support that they need. I can remember until relatively recently, mental ill health was treated in the same way. People who didn't speak out about that, either people who were suffering with depression or anxiety, certainly, you know, that was in experience in my family, didn't talk about it, and now we can and we do, and even, you know, members of the royal family talk about it, and we need to get to that point. We need to get to that point with families affected by substance misuse, and it's going to take a while, but we shouldn't be ashamed to keep banging on about it, because that's the way I think we can make a change. Rob, I don't think there's any more questions that we can take at the moment, but we have everything on. We have a record of all the questions, do we not, and the comments?
We do, yes, and
yeah.
We can follow up with people afterwards on specific.
Okay, Philip, any final thoughts?
I would just say, you know, if we don't want to feel disappointed by an alcohol strategy whenever it comes out, then, you know, support AdFam in their lobbying, and let's look for the things that didn't get into the drug strategy and try and get them into the alcohol strategy, and let's try and focus alcohol at least on the family. So I think there's a great job for all of us to do to try and help AdFam to carry the argument with that one.
Carry the banner. Thank you, Joe. Any final comment?
No, I think really just for everybody to do what they're doing in terms of the work that they do, and, you know, as much as we can, you know, support AdFam in the work they do, because it's going to help us all in one way or another. And even the smallest of things can make a difference. Just sharing something, it takes less than, you know, a few minutes. And I know we're all busy, but that sort of stuff really makes a difference. And encouraging anybody you might know, like a family member that might be willing to share anything that's going to reduce the stigma, you know, trying to get that exposure out there is going to be of benefit to everybody.
Thank you, Joe. Thank you to Rob and Megan, my colleagues, for putting this together. Thank you to you all for coming. Thank you for your support. We couldn't do it without you. And please, let's all of us together recognise that this is a collective campaign, a collective awareness week. It's a collective effort. And because I think there's huge strength in collaboration and supporting each other in this extremely important and still unrecognised and neglected problem. So thank you very much. I think we have Rob, we've got I'm not quite sure, is it next week? We've got a forum on stigma. We've got some academics talking about the work that they've done on stigma. So please look out for that on our website and on Eventbrite. And we look forward at AdFam to continue to work with you and on your and for you and with you. And thank you again to Joe. Thank you again to Philip. And enjoy. I hope it's very sunny where I am in Leicestershire. I hope it is where you are, and you enjoy the sunshine in the rest of the day. And thank you again for your support and for your commitment to this very, very important cause. Thank you.